The morning sun cast long shadows across the hospital corridors as William walked slowly toward the room he had been dreading to enter. His footsteps echoed against the polished floors, each step feeling heavier than the last. The smell of disinfectant filled his nostrils, a constant reminder of where he was and why he was there. Kate walked beside him, her hand firmly clasped in his, providing the only comfort he could find in this moment of unbearable pain. They had received the call 3 days earlier. The voice on the other end had been gentle but direct, explaining that the time had come. The doctors had done everything they could, but sometimes even the best medical care couldn't change what was meant to be. William's grandmother, the woman who had been a pillar of strength for their family for nearly a century, was preparing to say her final goodbye to the world she had served so faithfully. As they approached the door, William paused and took a deep breath. Kate squeezed his hand 3 times, their secret code that meant, "I love you," without needing to speak the words aloud. They had developed this simple gesture during their early dating years, and it had carried them through countless moments of joy and sorrow. Today it would help carry them through the most difficult goodbye of their lives. The room was filled with soft afternoon light filtering through sheer curtains. Medical equipment hummed quietly in the background, monitoring vital signs that everyone knew were gradually weakening. Family members sat in chairs arranged around the bed, some reading quietly, others simply watching and waiting. The atmosphere was peaceful despite the underlying sadness that touched everyone present. William's grandmother lay propped up against several pillows, her eyes closed, but her breathing steady. Even in her weakened state, there was something regal about her presence. Her silver hair was perfectly arranged, and someone had placed her favorite pearl necklace around her neck. She looked exactly as William remembered her from his childhood, when she would tell him stories about courage and duty, about serving others even when it was difficult. Kate had never imagined she would witness such an intimate family moment. When she first started dating William, the thought of being present during such personal times seemed impossible. Yet here she was, accepted completely as part of the family, sharing in both their joys and their deepest sorrows. She felt the weight of the moment, understanding that she was witnessing the end of an era. The elderly woman opened her eyes slowly, and a gentle smile spread across her face when she saw William approaching. Her voice was weak but clear when she spoke his name. The sound of it brought tears to his eyes immediately, though he tried his best to remain composed. This was not the time to break down, he told himself. This was the time to be strong, to show the same grace and dignity that she had always demonstrated. Other family members quietly made space around the bed, understanding without words that William needed these precious moments. Some stepped outside to give them privacy, while others moved to chairs further away. Everyone seemed to understand that these final conversations were sacred, that they should be witnessed, but not interrupted. Kate stood slightly behind William, close enough to offer support but far enough away to respect the intimate nature of the moment. She watched as 3 generations of royalty shared what would likely be their final words together. The weight of history seemed to fill the room, along with the simple, profound love between a grandmother and her grandson. William sat carefully on the edge of the bed and took his grandmother's hand in both of his. Her skin was paper-thin and cool to the touch, but her grip was surprisingly firm. She looked directly into his eyes, and in that gaze, he saw decades of wisdom, love, and pride. She had watched him grow from a mischievous child into a responsible man, had guided him through the darkest periods of his life, and had celebrated his greatest achievements. The conversation that followed was quiet and personal, filled with memories, expressions of love, and gentle guidance for the future. She spoke about the importance of family, about the responsibility that would one day rest on his shoulders, and about finding joy even in the most challenging times. Her words were carefully chosen, as they always had been, carrying weight and meaning that would stay with him forever. As the afternoon wore on, more family members gathered around the bed. The room filled with quiet conversations, gentle laughter at shared memories, and the comfortable silence that comes when people who love each other simply enjoy being together. Despite the sadness of the situation, there was something beautiful about the way everyone came together to surround her with love during these final days. Kate observed it all with wonder and deep respect. She had grown up in a loving family, but she had never experienced anything quite like this. The combination of personal grief and public responsibility, the way private emotions had to be balanced with royal duty, was something entirely new to her. Yet she found herself naturally falling into the rhythm of it, offering comfort where she could, and stepping back when family traditions required it. As evening approached, the medical staff made their rounds, checking equipment and ensuring their patient was comfortable. The family took turns sitting beside the bed, sharing stories and memories that brought both laughter and tears. William found himself thinking about all the lessons his grandmother had taught him, both through her words and through her example of a life lived in service to others. The second day brought a subtle change in the atmosphere. The morning light seemed softer, and there was a quietness in the room that hadn't been there before. William arrived early, having barely slept the night before. His mind had been filled with memories, cycling through decades of moments with his grandmother. From childhood visits to official ceremonies, from private conversations to public appearances, their relationship had been the steady foundation beneath so many of his life's experiences. Kate brought fresh flowers from the palace gardens, remembering how much the elderly woman had always loved having natural beauty around her. The roses were a soft pink color, the same shade as the dress she had worn to William and Kate's wedding. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, though it had only been a few years. That day had been filled with such joy and hope for the future. Today carried a different kind of emotion, but love remained at the center of it all. The medical team had explained that they were now focused entirely on comfort. The machines that had been monitoring every heartbeat and breath were gradually being removed, replaced by softer lighting and more comfortable arrangements. It was a transition from fighting against what was coming to accepting it with grace and dignity. The family understood and they supported the decision completely. William spent the morning reading aloud from a book of poetry that his grandmother had always enjoyed. His voice was steady and clear, though Kate could see the emotion in his eyes as he read verses about love, loss, and the beauty of a life well lived. Sometimes the elderly woman would nod slightly or smile, indicating that she was listening and finding comfort in the familiar words. Other family members came and went throughout the day, each bringing their own memories and their own way of saying goodbye. Some brought photo albums and shared stories about pictures that captured happy moments from years past. Others simply sat quietly, holding her hand and being present in the silence. There was no right or wrong way to handle these final hours, and everyone was following their heart. Kate found herself thinking about her own grandparents and the lessons they had taught her about strength and resilience. She realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, not just because of the public importance of the woman lying in the bed, but because of the very human way that love and loss were being handled, despite all the protocol and tradition that usually surrounded royal life. This was simply a family saying goodbye to someone they cherished. In the afternoon, William's grandmother asked to speak with Kate privately. The request surprised everyone, including Kate herself, but William immediately understood the importance of the moment. He helped his grandmother sit up a bit more comfortably, then stepped back to give them privacy. Other family members also moved away, creating a quiet space around the bed. The conversation was brief but profound. The elderly woman took Kate's hands in her own and spoke about the future, about the role that Kate would play in supporting William and serving the people. Her words were chosen carefully, carrying the weight of experience and the hope of someone who had dedicated her entire life to duty and service. She spoke about finding balance between public responsibility and private happiness, about the importance of staying true to yourself, even when the whole world is watching. Kate listened carefully, understanding that she was receiving guidance from someone who had navigated these challenges for decades. The advice wasn't just about royal duties or public appearances. It was about maintaining your sense of self, about protecting your family relationships, and about finding joy even when carrying heavy responsibilities. These were lessons that could only come from lived experience, and Kate felt honored to receive them. When their private conversation ended, William returned to his grandmother's side. Kate could see in his eyes that he was grateful for whatever had been shared between the two most important women in his life. There was something peaceful about knowing that his grandmother had taken the time to connect with Kate in such a personal way. It felt like a blessing and a bridge between the past and the future. The evening brought a gathering of close friends who had been part of the family's life for many years. People arrived quietly, offering their presence rather than their words. The room filled with a different kind of energy, one that spoke of decades of friendship and shared experiences. These were the people who had been there through celebrations and sorrows, who knew the woman in the bed as more than just a public figure. Stories began to flow naturally as old friends shared memories. There was laughter mixed with tears as people remembered funny moments, acts of unexpected kindness, and the countless ways she had touched their lives. William found comfort in these stories, seeing his grandmother through the eyes of others and understanding even more fully the impact she had made on so many people. Kate observed the evening with fascination and deep respect. She was seeing how a life of service created ripples that extended far beyond what any one person could imagine. The friends gathered around the bed represented decades of relationships, each one carrying their own collection of memories and their own sense of loss. Yet there was also celebration in their sharing, a recognition of a life that had been lived fully and with purpose. As the night grew later, the gathering became smaller and more intimate. Close family members remained, taking turns sitting beside the bed and maintaining a quiet vigil. William refused to leave, wanting to be present for whatever time remained. Kate stayed beside him, offering silent support and sharing in the weight of these precious final hours. The elderly woman slept peacefully through most of the night, occasionally stirring to smile at whoever was sitting nearest to her. Each time, she opened her eyes. She seemed to take in the faces around her with satisfaction, as if she was making sure her loved ones were all right. Even in her weakness, she was still taking care of others, still putting their needs before her own. The third morning arrived with an unusual stillness that seemed to settle over everything like a gentle blanket. William had dozed fitfully in the chair beside the bed, unwilling to leave even for a few hours of proper rest. Kate had brought him coffee and a light breakfast, but he had barely touched either. His entire focus remained on his grandmother, watching for any sign of discomfort or need. The medical staff moved quietly through the room, checking on their patient with professional care and obvious personal affection. It was clear that they had developed their own relationship with her over the years, and they too were struggling with the approaching farewell. Their gentle manner and respectful presence added to the peaceful atmosphere that everyone was working to maintain. Kate had never imagined that watching someone prepare to leave this world could be beautiful, but that was the only word that seemed appropriate for what she was witnessing. There was grace in the way the elderly woman accepted what was coming, dignity in how she continued to show concern for others, even in her weakest moments, and love that filled every corner of the room, despite the underlying sadness. William's father arrived early that morning, and the reunion between mother and son was tender and private. Kate stepped back with other family members, giving them space for their own goodbye. She watched from across the room as two generations shared words that would have to last forever. The conversation was quiet but intense, and she could see the weight of unfinished business being addressed and resolved. Throughout the morning, there were moments of unexpected lightness. Someone would remember a funny story, and gentle laughter would fill the room. The elderly woman would smile at these memories, sometimes even adding her own quiet comments about events from years past. These moments reminded everyone that this was not just about ending, but about celebrating a remarkable life that had been filled with both serious responsibilities and simple joys. Kate found herself thinking about her own children and what kind of legacy she hoped to leave them someday. Watching this final chapter unfold made her realize how important it was to create memories worth treasuring, to show love in ways that would be remembered long after words were forgotten. She saw how William's grandmother had woven herself into the fabric of so many lives that her influence would continue long after she was gone. The afternoon brought a different quality of light through the windows, softer and more golden than before. The elderly woman had been sleeping for several hours, her breathing steady but noticeably more shallow. William held her hand continuously, occasionally speaking to her quietly even though she couldn't respond. Kate knew he was telling her things he needed her to hear, sharing feelings that had been building in his heart. A chaplain arrived to offer comfort and prayers, creating a sacred space around the bed. The simple ceremony was inclusive and peaceful, acknowledging the approaching transition with reverence rather than fear. Family members joined hands around the bed, creating a circle of love and support that seemed to fill the room with warmth. Even those who weren't particularly religious found comfort in the ritual and the sense of community it created. Kate was struck by how personal this moment was, despite the public life that the elderly woman had lived. Here in this quiet room, surrounded by people who loved her, she was simply a mother, grandmother, and friend, preparing for her final journey. All the titles and responsibilities seemed less important than the relationships she had built and nurtured throughout her long life. As evening approached, there was a subtle change in the atmosphere. The elderly woman's breathing became more irregular, and the medical staff quietly prepared the family for what was likely to come during the night. There was no panic or dramatic urgency, just a gentle recognition that the time was drawing near. Everyone understood, and they gathered closer around the bed. William finally allowed himself to show the full weight of his emotions. Tears flowed freely down his face as he spoke to his grandmother about his love for her, his gratitude for everything she had taught him, and his promise to carry forward the values she had instilled in him. His words were a mixture of farewell and commitment, acknowledging both the ending and the continuation of her influence on his life. Kate watched her husband's vulnerability with deep admiration and love. She had seen him handle public crises with composure and grace, but this private moment of raw emotion showed her a different kind of strength. There was courage in allowing himself to feel the full impact of this loss, in not hiding behind the protective walls that royal training might have encouraged. The evening hours passed slowly, with family members taking turns sitting closest to the bed. Conversations were quiet and meaningful, filled with expressions of love and gratitude that had perhaps been left unspoken in busier times. There was something healing about these final exchanges, a sense that important things were being said and received, even if the responses were only gentle squeezes of the hand or peaceful smiles. Kate found herself thinking about the nature of goodbye and how it could be both heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. She was witnessing the end of an era, not just for the royal family but for an entire generation that had experienced so much history. Yet she was also seeing the beginning of a new chapter, one where the lessons and love from the past would guide the future. As the night grew deeper, the elderly woman's periods of wakefulness became briefer and more precious. Each time she opened her eyes, William was there to meet her gaze, to let her know that she was surrounded by love and that everything would be all right. These wordless communications seemed to carry more meaning than any elaborate speech could have conveyed. The fourth day dawned with a sense of profound quiet that seemed to acknowledge what everyone in the room already knew. This would likely be the final day of an extraordinary life that had touched millions of people across the globe. William had not left the bedside throughout the night, maintaining his vigil with a dedication that spoke of deep love and unwavering commitment. Kate had remained nearby, offering silent support and ensuring that he stayed nourished and hydrated during these crucial hours. The morning brought a gathering of immediate family members who had traveled from various locations to be present for these final moments. The room filled with quiet voices and gentle embraces as people who had been separated by distance and busy schedules came together and shared love and mutual support. There was something powerful about seeing how this approaching farewell had drawn everyone closer, creating unity in the face of impending loss. William's grandmother had been awake for brief periods during the early morning hours, and each time she opened her eyes, her gaze would find William first before moving around the room to acknowledge others. Her eyes still held the sparkle of intelligence and warmth that had characterized her throughout her long life, even though her voice had become too weak for extended conversation. The love in her expression spoke volumes without requiring words. Kate observed the morning with a mixture of sadness and awe. She was witnessing history in the most personal possible way, seeing how a life of public service came to its private conclusion surrounded by the people who mattered most. The contrast between the intimate nature of this goodbye and the global significance of the woman lying in the bed created a poignant reminder of the humanity that existed beneath all the formal titles and responsibilities. The medical team continued their gentle care, focusing entirely on comfort and dignity, rather than any attempt to prolong what was clearly coming to its natural end. Their professional expertise was evident in how they managed pain and ensured peace, but their personal compassion showed in the extra touches of care that went beyond medical necessity. It was clear that they too had been touched by the grace and kindness of their patient. Throughout the morning, there were moments of unexpected communication that surprised everyone present. The elderly woman would suddenly open her eyes and speak a few words that carried profound meaning, offering comfort to someone who was struggling or sharing a memory that brought smiles through tears. These brief exchanges felt like precious gifts, final offerings of wisdom and love from someone who had spent her entire life caring for others. William found strength in these moments, understanding that even as his grandmother prepared to leave them, she was still fulfilling her role as the heart of their family. Her concern for others remained paramount, her desire to ease their pain more important than her own comfort. This selflessness had been a defining characteristic throughout her life, and it continued to shine through even in these final hours. The afternoon brought a shift in the quality of light and the atmosphere in the room. There was a sense that time was becoming more precious, that each moment held special significance that needed to be fully experienced rather than simply endured. Family members began sharing their most treasured memories, creating a spoken celebration of a life that had been rich in both public achievements and private joys. Kate listened to these stories with fascination and growing understanding of the woman who had influenced William so profoundly. She heard tales of quiet acts of kindness that had never made the newspapers, of personal sacrifices made for the greater good, and of moments of simple human happiness that had sustained a lifetime of service. These memories painted a picture of someone who had managed to remain genuinely human despite the extraordinary circumstances of her position. As the hours passed, William's grandmother's periods of consciousness became shorter and more peaceful. When she was awake, her focus seemed to be on ensuring that everyone around her felt loved and appreciated. She would look at each person with intention, as if she was memorizing their faces and offering them a final blessing through her gaze. These wordless communications carried more emotional weight than elaborate speeches could have managed. The evening brought a different kind of gathering as extended family members and close friends arrived to pay their respects. The room filled with quiet conversations and shared memories, creating an atmosphere of celebration rather than purely mourning. People spoke of the impact she had made on their lives, the lessons she had taught through her example, and the ways her influence would continue long after she was gone. William found comfort in these tributes, seeing his grandmother through the eyes of others and understanding even more fully the scope of her impact on the world. Kate watched him during these conversations, seeing how the stories helped him process his grief while also filling him with pride for the woman who had shaped so much of who he had become. There was healing in this sharing, a way of honoring the past while preparing for the future. The night hours were marked by a deeper quiet and more intimate gathering of only the closest family members. The elderly woman's breathing had become more labored, and everyone understood that they were likely witnessing her final hours. There was no panic or desperate attempts to change what was happening, just a peaceful acceptance and a commitment to surrounding her with love until the very end. Kate marveled at the grace with which everyone was handling this profound moment. She had expected more drama or emotional upheaval, but instead she found herself part of a process that felt almost sacred in its dignity and love. The approaching goodbye was heartbreaking, but it was also beautiful in its demonstration of what family meant and how love could transcend even the ultimate separation. As the night deepened, William positioned himself closest to his grandmother, holding her hand and speaking to her quietly about his love, his gratitude, and his promises for the future. Kate remained nearby, offering her presence as support while respecting the intimacy of these final communications between grandmother and grandson. She understood that she was witnessing something extraordinary, a goodbye that would shape William for the rest of his life. The fifth day arrived with an almost ethereal quality to the early morning light, as if nature itself was acknowledging the significance of what was unfolding. William had maintained his position beside the bed throughout the night, occasionally dozing but never truly sleeping, unwilling to miss any moment of his grandmother's final hours. Kate had brought him fresh clothes and encouraged him to step away briefly to refresh himself, but he had politely refused, needing to be present for whatever time remained. The elderly woman's breathing had become increasingly shallow and peaceful during the night, and the medical staff had quietly indicated that the end was likely approaching within hours. There was no medical intervention attempted now, just careful monitoring to ensure complete comfort and the presence of family members who had gathered to provide love and support during these sacred final moments. Kate found herself deeply moved by the serenity that seemed to surround the bed. Despite the profound sadness of the situation, there was something transcendent about witnessing someone prepare to leave this world with such grace and dignity. The elderly woman's face had taken on an almost luminous quality, peaceful and free from any sign of distress or fear. It was as if she had already begun the transition to whatever came next. William spoke to his grandmother continuously throughout the morning, sharing memories from his childhood, expressing gratitude for her guidance throughout his life, and making promises about how he would honor her memory and continue her work. His voice was steady and strong, even though tears flowed freely down his face. Kate could see that these final communications were as much for his own healing as they were for his grandmother's comfort. Other family members took turns approaching the bed to share their own farewells. Each person brought their own style of goodbye, some speaking aloud while others simply held her hand in silence. There was something beautiful about seeing how differently people expressed their love, yet how all of these various approaches seemed to create a unified atmosphere of care and respect around the dying woman. The afternoon brought a noticeable change in the elderly woman's condition. Her periods of consciousness became even briefer, but when she did open her eyes, they held a clarity and peace that seemed to reassure everyone present that she was not suffering. She would look around the room with what appeared to be satisfaction, as if she was taking comfort in seeing her loved ones gathered together and supporting each other. Kate watched William during these intense hours and saw him drawing on reserves of strength that came from his deep relationship with his grandmother and from the years of training she had provided about duty and service. Even in his grief, he was thinking about others in the room, making sure everyone felt included in these final moments and that his grandmother's dignity was preserved throughout the process. The medical staff moved through the room with extraordinary gentleness, checking on their patient with minimal disruption while ensuring that family members had everything they needed for their vigil. Their professional expertise was evident in how they managed the situation, but their personal compassion showed in the extra care they took to preserve the peaceful atmosphere that everyone was working to maintain. As the evening hours approached, there was an almost palpable sense that the final transition was beginning. The elderly woman's breathing became more irregular, with longer pauses between breaths that caused everyone to hold their own breath in anticipation. Yet there was no sense of panic or desperation, just a quiet acceptance of the natural process that was unfolding before their eyes. William positioned himself even closer to his grandmother, leaning down so that his face was near hers and speaking directly into her ear. Kate could see his lips moving in what appeared to be final expressions of love and gratitude, words that were meant only for the woman who had been such a crucial influence in his life. The intimacy of these moments was profound, representing the culmination of a relationship that had shaped him from childhood into adulthood. Other family members formed a circle around the bed, each person contributing their presence to the sacred space that had developed around the approaching farewell. Some held hands while others simply stood in respectful silence, but everyone seemed united in their desire to surround the dying woman with as much love and support as possible. The room felt filled with decades of shared memories and mutual affection. Kate found herself thinking about the nature of legacy and how a single life could touch so many others in meaningful ways. She was witnessing the conclusion of a life that had been dedicated to service, and she could see how that commitment had created ripples of influence that would continue long after this final goodbye. The love in the room was testament to the impact one person could make through consistent kindness and dedication to others. The night hours brought an even deeper quiet and a sense of approaching resolution. The elderly woman's breathing continued to slow, and everyone understood that they were witnessing the final chapter of an extraordinary life. William never left her side, continuing to speak to her quietly even when she could no longer respond, ensuring that she was surrounded by expressions of love until the very end. Kate remained close to William, offering silent support while respecting the deeply personal nature of his final communications with his grandmother. She understood that she was witnessing something that would influence William for the rest of his life, a goodbye that would become a source of both sadness and strength in the years to come. The privilege of being present for such an intimate family moment was not lost on her, and she felt honored to share in this profound experience of love and loss. The sixth and final day began in the quiet hours before dawn, when the world seemed suspended between night and morning. William had not moved from his position beside the bed, his hand gently holding his grandmother's as her breathing became increasingly peaceful and shallow. Kate sat nearby, maintaining her supportive presence while witnessing what she understood would be the final hours of an extraordinary life that had touched millions of people around the world. The elderly woman's face had taken on an almost serene glow in the soft lamplight. All signs of struggle or discomfort had disappeared, replaced by an expression of complete peace that seemed to comfort everyone present. Her breathing was so gentle now that the family had to watch carefully to see the subtle rise and fall of her chest, each breath precious and increasingly rare. William continued speaking to his grandmother in whispers that were meant only for her ears. He told her about his love, about his promises to continue her work, and about how her influence would live on through him and future generations. His words came from the deepest part of his heart, expressing feelings that had been building throughout his entire life but had never been more important to share than in these final moments. Kate observed the morning with a mixture of profound sadness and deep admiration for the grace she was witnessing. Even in dying, William's grandmother was teaching lessons about dignity, peace, and the power of love to transcend even the ultimate separation. The way she was leaving this world was as remarkable as the way she had lived in it, with complete focus on the comfort and well-being of others rather than herself. Other family members maintained their quiet vigil around the bed, each person contributing their presence to the sacred atmosphere that had developed during these final hours. Some held hands in silent prayer while others simply sat in respectful quiet, but everyone seemed united in their desire to surround the dying woman with as much love and support as possible until her journey was complete. The medical staff continued their gentle monitoring, ensuring comfort while respecting the intimate nature of the family's farewell. Their professional expertise was evident in how smoothly they managed the situation, but their personal compassion showed in the extra care they took to preserve the peaceful environment that everyone was working to maintain during these precious final hours. As the morning progressed, there were longer pauses between the elderly woman's breaths, each gap causing the family to hold their own breath in anticipation. Yet there was no sense of panic or desperation in the room, just a quiet acceptance of the natural process that was unfolding. Everyone understood that they were witnessing something sacred, the peaceful conclusion of a life that had been lived with extraordinary purpose and dedication. William leaned even closer to his grandmother, his face inches from hers as he continued his quiet expressions of love and gratitude. Kate could see the profound connection between them, a bond that had been forged over decades and was now being honored in these final moments of communication. Even though his grandmother could no longer respond with words, William seemed confident that she could hear him and understand his messages. The afternoon brought a subtle shift in the quality of light and the atmosphere in the room. There was a sense of approaching completion, as if all the important things had been said and all the necessary love had been expressed. The elderly woman's breathing became even more gentle and infrequent, and everyone present understood that they were likely witnessing the final hours of her remarkable journey through this world. Kate found herself thinking about the nature of goodbye and how it could be both heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. She was witnessing the end of an era, not just for the royal family, but for everyone who had been touched by this extraordinary woman's life and service. Yet she was also seeing how love could make even the most difficult farewell into something meaningful. and healing. As the evening hours approached, the elderly woman's breathing became so peaceful that it was barely perceptible. William maintained his position beside her, holding her hand and continuing to speak words of love and comfort even though he knew the end was very near. His dedication during these final hours was a testament to the depth of their relationship and his commitment to ensuring that she felt surrounded by love until the very end. The family gathered closer around the bed as they sensed the approaching final moments. There was no drama or emotional upheaval, just a quiet recognition that they were about to witness the peaceful conclusion of an extraordinary life. Everyone seemed to understand their role in creating a sacred space for this final transition, offering their presence and their love as the ultimate gift to someone who had given so much to others throughout her long life. In the quiet hours of the evening, surrounded by the people who loved her most, William's grandmother took her final breath. It was so peaceful that it took a moment for everyone to realize that the transition had occurred. There was no struggle or distress, just a gentle release that seemed to fill the room with an even deeper sense of peace and completion. William continued holding her hand for several minutes after she had gone, as if he was reluctant to acknowledge that their physical connection was finally ending. Kate watched him with deep love and admiration, seeing how he was handling this profound loss with the same grace and dignity that his grandmother had taught him throughout his life. The tears that flowed down his face were a testament to the depth of his love, but his composure showed the strength of character that she had helped to develop in him. The room filled with quiet expressions of love and gratitude as family members shared their final farewells with the woman who had been the center of their world for so many years. There was sadness in these moments, but also a profound sense of completion and peace. She had lived a remarkable life, had touched countless others with her kindness and service, and had died surrounded by the love of those who mattered most to her. Kate understood that she had witnessed something extraordinary, not just the death of a public figure, but the peaceful conclusion of a life lived with purpose, dignity, and unwavering commitment to others. The lessons she had observed during these final days would stay with her forever, shaping her understanding of what it meant to live with grace and to face even the ultimate challenge with courage and love.